The free train to Reno. Author unknown. The man in the cowboy hat and eye patch didn't look like a man. No, he looked more like a leather boot. I don't know if it was the bourbon in me, but he looked like he wanted to talk. And what do you know? He told me he sold his soul to El Diablo on a train going to Reno. I laughed at him. Who'd believe that? But he told me to listen, and I let him go off. Here's what he said. It wasn't very long. I scribbled it all on a napkin. Here's what I remember. If you're ever going to go out west, don't take the free train. They'll tell you it's free. Don't believe 'em. It isn't. Those dust devils make you pay with your own blood, my boy. I got here on $2 and a pop liver. And I'll never get them back, goddammit. Never. I'll tell you something, son. The evil eye is real. Fish eye. Crazy eye. Call it whatever you want. It'll turn your guts pitch black. It'll burn your whole fucking face off. You'll wish you were blind. If you ever see it, you might as well stick your eye in a barbed wire fence. You'll drink yourself half to death to drown it out of your memory. It hurts to drink now. My tongue's been turning white. See? I can't even scream anymore. And the worst part of it all, it's stopping at my grave. Hey, next stop. You're next. That cracked him up. Then he rubbed his eyes and chugged the rest of his Lone Star beer and started to walk out the door. I've got to go, he said, or I'll miss my ride. Gentleman Bill Toombs by the Prowler. Gentleman Bill Toombs was undoubtedly the fastest gun west of the Mississippi, and if there was one faster in the East, no one really gave much of a half a shit, because it was out west where things mattered most, at least when it came to gunfighting. Yes, sir, gunfighting was the gentleman's business, and business was good. Mr. Bill Toombs received his nickname, Gentleman, for his courtesy he showed his victim before and after the gunfight, making sure after he killed his opponent he gave them a proper burial. From Virginia City in Nevada to Marshall, Texas, the gentleman has left a wake of corpses on his trail. Wanted in 5 states, his face is etched in the minds and memories of every lawman and bounty hunter in half the West. Unfortunately for them, the gentleman doesn't just dispose of fellow gunfighters. He also gets a real pleasure of dispatching lawmen and bounty hunters, especially the bounty hunters which he considers one step up from being rats on a cockroach. If you're brave enough to come after him, he considers you fair game, shiny star or not. It doesn't matter to him what you're wearing or who you are, because at the end of the affair, you'll be resting 6 feet under after you meet with the gentleman. Not much is known about him besides fighting for the North in the war between the states, where he was injured, taking a musket ball in the leg, partially fracturing his femur. It left him with a slight limp when he walks, but nothing outright noticeable, and definitely not a hindrance to his gunfighting skills. There are claims that he hails from the East, either Boston or somewhere in Pennsylvania, supposedly coming from a wealthy family, expected to go to medical school. Whatever the reason, those plans changed, and he found himself in the West, with a penchant for gambling and women, two things that could get you quickly killed in the West. So he latched on to an old gunfighter who went by the name of Samuel Sawed-Off Johnson, a reputable gunsman who taught the young gentleman everything he knew about killing a man. Now, with the knowledge of defending himself and handling a piece of iron, he set out blazing his trail of self-debauchery across the deserts of the West. He didn't take long before he found himself in his first bit of trouble. It happened gambling at the poker table. He was accused of cheating, which he denied, but was definitely doing, by a man named Prickly Pants Sam Waterston. Old Prickly Pants jumped up from the table and started for his gun, but the gentleman Bill Toombs remained seated and quickly pulled out his silver-plated revolver and sent 2 rounds into Prickly Pants' groin. He was the first to find out there's no one faster than the gentleman. Little did Bill know, however, that Prickly Pants Waterston was the leader of the Waterston Gang, the deadliest gang in El Paso. So for the next few weeks, the gentleman had to dispose of each Waterston brother that came along. One by one they fell, but Bill Toombs was gentlemanly to each and every Waterston victim. After that, the gentleman became famous. The papers talked about him from San Francisco to New York City. A book was published about his exploits, and his legend grew and grew. From there it only got bloodier afterwards, because every person who considered themselves handy with a gun wanted to test how good they really were. The corpses started to pile up for the gentleman. Gunfights almost on the regular, even when he didn't want to. His soul became tormented, and his victims started to haunt his dreams. Through the years, he could swear he could see them as he entered a new town, following him, each town another face, the face of the person he killed in that town, and there were countless of faces in each town, and no town was empty of a face, for the gentleman killed a lot of faces in a lot of places. He was endlessly haunted. He could feel his mind begin to wander, and his skills begin to slip. He barely slept anymore, and he started to drink heavily. One day he was out riding, and he found himself ambushed by the sons of some of the Waterston gang. He was able to blow 2 of them away right on the spot, but quickly realized there were just too many to handle. So he turned and rode his horse as fast as he could, and there was a town nearby. He made his way into that town, with gunshots ringing out behind, and held himself up in the saloon. He picked off one from inside, leaving only 2 left. He then went outside to face them on the street. A showdown it would be, 2 on 1. He stared across at them, and them at him, waiting for the clock to make its next chime. When it rung out, everyone's pistol was drawn, and once again the gentleman was the only one standing, even though the odds were stacked against him. He was staggering, but he was alive. He assumed he was grazed by a bullet. He shuffled back into the saloon, needed a drink. For some reason he was uncomfortably parched. He staggered up to the bar, but the barkeep was not there. As a matter of fact, no one was. Just a quiet, eerie silence, with the wind whistling past the door. He turned back behind the bar and yelled if someone was there, but there was no answer. Just then, someone answered from behind him.
"Hello, Gentleman Bill."
He quickly turned around and saw a man in black sitting at one of the tables with his arms folded on his lap and his head down. The gentleman spoke loudly, but with a slight tremble, and said, "Who's that? Who goes there? Where did you come from?" The man in black slowly raised up his head and said, "It's me." The gentleman's eyes widened in fear and muttered, "But, you're dead. I killed you 2 years ago." The man was Lee Stubblefield, a bounty hunter the gentleman killed in Texarkana 2 years ago, leaving a brothel. The bounty hunter smiled and said,
You sure as hell did. Put 2 slugs in my chest. Died right on the spot. I appreciated how gentlemanly you were about everything, though, and burying me properly.
The gentleman started to tremble slightly and sat down at the table. Are you a ghost? I thought I've seen you following me before, but I thought I was hallucinating," he said with a slight trepidation.
I am, as a matter of fact. Until now, however, I could not be heard or be this close to you.
The bounty hunter said with an air of mystery. He proceeded by telling the gentleman that he was here to warn him to not go outside, for he would not like the changes to the world he once knew, the world of the West, of gunfights and gambling, and being a living legend. He then told the gentleman he was here to take him with him, and when he said that, the doors to the saloon opened, and in walked other individuals the gentleman had killed over the years. Other ghosts. The gentleman quickly jumped up and shouted, "Why me? What do you want with me? I killed you all fair and square, and was plumb polite with all your burials as well. They don't call me the gentleman for nothing." Then the bounty hunter replied,
Yes, you did kill us all fairly, and were quite gentlemanly about it. That's why we're here. You were a worthy opponent, and you deserve to come with us to a world that would suit you better, where a proper gunfighter belongs.
The gentleman moved about towards the door and laughed. "I'm in my prime. Why would I want to go off with a bunch of dead ghosts? What, to make the spirits jealous?" he said sarcastically. The bounty hunter pointed at him to turn around and look out onto the street. Then he said,
We're here because you're no longer in your prime. You're dead.
The gentleman slowly turned around and looked out onto the street as the bounty hunter was saying this, and saw his lifeless body sprawled out in the middle of the street. The gentleman screamed.
You didn't survive the duel, Bill. You did your best. You managed to kill both the Watterson boys, but it was 2 against 1. They got you too.
The bounty hunter said. Just then the 2 Watterson boys walked into the saloon, riddled with bullet holes. They each gave a tip of their hat as they walked past the gentleman, then sat and joined the others.
It's time to come home, Bill. Come with us now, and everything will be fine. Trust me, you won't like what's out there. You won't like this world if you say no.
The bounty hunter said cautiously. The gentleman screamed, No, I'm not dead. I'm alive. I can't be dead. I'm the greatest gunfighter alive. No one can kill me. Be gone from here. Get away from me, you damn ghosts." Then he flung open the saloon doors and went outside. As he did, a bright light enveloped him and blinded his sight only for a second. And when he was able to collect his bearings, he found himself alone, back in the saloon. He cried out to the ghost, but no one was there. The gentleman laughed and said, "Ha! I knew there weren't no damn ghosts. I better lay off the booze for a bit." He got up from the table and walked towards the door, which was different. This was a solid door, where the other saloon doors were the ones that swung open and you could see what was going on outside. As a matter of fact, his whole room was different. Well, yes, it was a saloon. It wasn't the one he was just in with the ghosts. He continued towards the door, and as he got closer, he could hear voices. People, he thought. Thank goodness I'm not alone. He quickly swung open the door and was greeted by a mass of people walking the streets of an old western town, except they were wearing clothes he'd never seen before, holding mechanical devices he'd never seen before that flashed when they tapped it. Families moving about looking through windows, and children holding balloons, laughing and screaming. He finally saw a few people that looked like him, dressed in the same attire, looking like proper gunfighters, but all they did was perform for the families. When they shot their guns, nothing happened. A person would pretend to be dead, but jump back up a few seconds later unharmed. Their guns weren't real. Nothing was real here. The gentleman walked into an Old West reenactment town, with tons of tourists and Old West reenactors. This was his world now, being forced to watch modern society as it passed him day by day, making light of the life he once lived. No more gunfights, no more gambling or women, or the thrill that the Old West lifestyle brought, and no more adversaries, and no more friends. He then realized the mistake he had made and began to scream, for he was alone. Spurs by Bobby Dangerously. Phew, that sun is hot. The Arizona desert is unbearable this time of year. The desert is very dry and unforgiving. It's becoming unnoticeable now as I start to die. I lost all feeling. See, I was just hung up by a noose a minute ago, here on this lonely tree, in the middle of the desert, on the outskirts of Dusty City. I'm slowly slipping into unconsciousness now. I can no longer move. I just swing a little now. But I peek one more time at the four standing there below me. 3 are just looking up at me, and one doesn't seem to be able to handle it. So he's looking away. As I die now, my spirit leaves my body. I notice that I don't go anywhere. It seems I'm stuck here. How great. The 4 leave and head back to town, I reckon. They left on horseback, and they take my horse as well. I vow revenge on my executioners. They have no idea what will hit them. The moon is high tonight. A full moon. What a sight to see. The small town of Dusty City in the moonlight. Something myself and my girl always enjoyed. I'm really going to miss her. I can move swiftly with ease. I head to town. I float through the main street unnoticed. I get to my destination. I enter the sheriff's office. The 4 are sitting there, playing cards and laughing. Must be nice to be alive, be able to enjoy yourself. I see one drinking. It is Michael. I start to make myself noticeable to them for a few minutes, allowing them to hear my spurs. Jack asked the others if they heard that. Richard said yes. He said it sounded like spurs. He looked around and asked if someone was here. Of course, I didn't reply. I clanged my spurs again, walking across the floor. I see Jack again. He's looking very scared now. Michael got up from the table and walked over to the jail cell. He asked the occupant if he was making the noise. The occupant said no. I clanged my spurs again and again. Jack and Richard started to get more frustrated, and Michael got a little angry. Michael yelled, "Who's there?" Of course, I don't make a sound. Jonathan, the fourth man, got up and looks to be shaken. Of course he is. That one couldn't even look at me while I was hanging. I clanged my spurs again. This time I start to walk closer to them. Jack got a little courage and drew out his gun. He said to come out, so he can see whoever is making that noise. He said he will deal with them personally. I swoop in and take over his body. I control his arm and I swiftly turn and point the gun at Michael and shoot him right between the eyes. Michael falls dead to the floor, flat on his back. Richard screams out in horror, as he couldn't believe that Jack would do that. Jonathan ran to the far desk and hid under it. I turned my attention to Richard. I screamed using Jack's voice and said, "Revenge!" Richard looked puzzled and horrified. I shot him right between the eyes. He fell against the wall and slid down to the floor, sitting upright against the wall, his face all covered now in blood. I then called out for Jonathan to come here, using Jack's voice. He crept out of the desk with his hands up. He was bent over, scared. He asked me not to shoot. I paused and looked at him. I raised the arm and put the gun to Jack's head and shot, killing him. My spirit left Jack's body and I moved in front of Jonathan. I was showing him myself, my spirit form, floating right in front of him. He was completely frightened. I noticed he pissed himself. It's all on the sheriff's office floor. He started to cry, to beg me not to kill him. He got down on his knees in his own urine, pleading me not to kill him. He then asked me what I was going to do to him. I told him I was letting him go. He looked surprised, but then I told him he will need to tell the world that any criminal, bank robber, sharpshooter, killer who comes into this town will die instantly. They will not survive the night. This town is haunted by a killer ghost who was once the sheriff, Elmer Rittenhouse. I screamed really loud, and that frightened the hell out of Jonathan. He got up and ran out of the sheriff's office and leaped onto his horse. Jonathan, riding off on his horse, left screaming what I just told him. The world will know that the sheriff is back in Dusty City. The Tunnels of the Wild West. Author unknown. I live in a small town in Montana. Back in the giddy-up days, it was full of saloons, cowboys, farmers, and the like. My town was a prosperous logging town, but they found they needed more men to haul the lumber. Japanese immigrants became the ideal worker for these jobs. They were eager to be in Montana and got along well with the locals. Even still, they were forced to live separately from the others. To keep them close to logging sites, the town developed a complex map of tunnels underground. These tunnels could be accessed in a few buildings and then spread out below the tumbleweeds and moonshine. When the trees were sparse, the town became a ghost town. A few decades later, a wealthy man named James Norad decided to revive the slowpoke ghost town in Montana. The tunnels were forgotten about. The J.N. building, which houses many profitable businesses, also holds the door to the old tunnels of the Wild West. Once they were stumbled upon during a renovation, they were opened privately and would not welcome the public. The tunnels became nothing but a fleeting rumor, one believed to not exist. I was 4 years old when my father decided to buy the J.N. building. He told me about the tunnels and encouraged me to explore the old building. Safely, darling. Don't go poking your nose in anyone's business, alive or dead. During the hot summers, I found serenity in the cool basement. There were large steel bars in front of the entrance to the tunnels. I used to like to pretend I was a ringmaster, and in that cage was my fierce lion. One day, when my own imagination failed to occupy me, I decided to venture into the tunnels. I easily slipped between the metal bars and opened the small wooden door. Once inside the tunnel, I turned on my flashlight and began my adventure. The tunnels had dirt floors, walls, and ceilings. I sang songs which echoed back to me. I could always find my way back to the door because of the light from the basement. Using the light as my breadcrumbs, I navigated the great maze under the quiet Montana streets. I was shocked when I made eye contact with a girl about my age. She had been around the next corner. She glanced shyly towards me. All I remember is that she wore a beautiful white dress, which was never dirtied by the tunnels. She and I became fast friends as we darted around the tunnels. I told my parents about my new friend, and they enjoyed the thought of me having an imaginary friend. The girl knew the tunnels much better than me, even though I had spent about an hour per morning investigating their dark twists and turns. She suggested for me to follow her to a new section. I eagerly raced after her, deep into the tunnels. Finally, we came to a door. I had never been here before, and curiosity prodded me like cattle towards this new discovery. The door was boarded up by 2 2x4s, crisscrossed over the door. I touched the door with the palm of my hand, tracing the pentagram carved in the center of the wood. Candle wax littered the floor, and the source of the wax sat high above my tiny frame. I studied the fallen wax and found multiple sets of footprints in the dirt. My small friend quietly took down the planks until the door was unlocked. She was about to push it open when my dad's voice rang through the tunnels. I began walking towards his call when my friend tugged on my sleeve. She told me there was an entire unexplored section on the other side of the door. The door was about 20 feet behind me, so she began pulling me back to the door. My dad turned the corner and scooped me up. He took me out of the tunnels and silently placed a padlock on the entrance. This is a true story. I changed the name of the building, but it's all true. My dad recently built a cement wall over the entrance to the tunnels. I know of one other entrance, but I haven't explored it. The Legend of Woodruff Mines by Bobby Dangerously. There is a story spoken around here, in these parts. It comes from a small town that is miles out in the middle of the western desert. There's supposed to be a mine filled with gold, or at least that's what they say. It's on the outskirts of the small town of Dusty City. The story is about the gold mine. It's called the Woodruff Mines. The Woodruff family found the mine and claimed it theirs, hence the name. The legend of the mine is that it's haunted and the spirits are very evil and violent. The town warns visitors not to enter, as they will end up dead. I guess it's a way for the folks in Dusty City to cause curiosity and to stir up business for themselves. Also, to get people to visit the lonely town. So let me tell you the story of the three miners who defied the town's warnings of not entering the mine. Jeb, Eugene, and a man they called Shorty walked up to the mine. Jeb and Eugene were all for entering, but Shorty was scared to do it. Jeb and Eugene told him that if he didn't enter, he would not get any of the gold they found. They told him that he has wasted his time on this trip then, if he doesn't enter with them. So Shorty gulped and entered with Jeb and Eugene into the mine, even though he was hesitant to do it. As they continued walking in deeper, Shorty started to hear noises. He told them that it may be the ghosts. Jeb laughed, as did Eugene. Jeb said he didn't hear anything. Eugene agreed with Jeb and said he didn't hear anything either. Eugene said to Shorty that he is letting the town folk's story get to his imagination. Jeb also said that the town just wants to scare people and for us not to enter the mine. The town wants the gold, or if there isn't any gold, then the town gets business from guys like us, as a story like this is too good not to rattle our curiosity. So there is nothing to worry about. All of a sudden, Eugene was lifted off his feet by an invisible force. He dropped the shovel and pickaxe to the ground and reached for his neck. He was choking. Jeb looked surprised and Shorty cried out in horror. Eugene was then thrown through the air and hit the wall of the mine. He hit hard and fell to the ground. Then the pickaxe lifted off the ground by itself and flew through the air and into Eugene's forehead, killing him instantly. Jeb and Shorty cried out in horror. Jeb pushed Shorty over, running, as he tried to leave the mine. He didn't get anywhere, as he was also lifted in the air by an invisible force. He was lifted by his ankle. His legs were up in the air and he was being whipped around in a circle. He then got closer to some rocks and splat. His head was crushed against the rock, and his body was tossed to the side. It lay there in the dirt, dead. Shorty was now so scared he couldn't move. He looked around as he couldn't see anything, or any ghost for that matter. He begged the ghost not to kill him, as he apologized for entering the mine. He said he just wants to go home. At that moment, a ghostly scream came from everywhere. the ghost started saying to Shorty.
No one enters the mine and takes the gold. There is no escape for trespassers.
Shorty was then lifted straight up and thrown violently down to the gravelly ground. He lost his breath. He couldn't breathe, as his ribs were broken. He was forced to stand up by the invisible force, and he saw with his frightened eyes his own shovel flying through the air at him. With a quick second, the shovel struck his throat and severed his head. His body fell to the ground, and his head rolled across the floor. The remains of all three were then thrown out of the mine, and they lay there in front of it for all to see. You see, that's what happens when you don't listen to the warnings people put out there. I guess after this story gets out, no one will be bothering my mine again and stealing my gold. Virginia City, Nevada Boneyard, circa 1979, by OK Calligrapher, 9854. In the spirit of the season, here is one of my real-life ghost stories. I used to believe in ghosts when I was a kid. Aside from Star Wars, my expertise was ghosts, Nessie, Bigfoot, UFOs, and spontaneous human combustion. This was after I lost interest in Legos and drawing dinosaurs. As a kid, I had many paranormal encounters, UFO sightings, and even did my own search for Bigfoot during every hike in the woods for scouts. Once I entered high school, I turned more to science and girls. All of those many paranormal encounters when I was little, I've since debunked. That ghost I saw running toward me in the fruit orchard behind our house turned out to be a white shirt hanging from a branch. It was left behind by a migrant worker during a harvest. Those Ouija board scares at my best friend's house, his dad admitted to moving the thing around just to watch us boys lose our shit. His mother still maintains her house is indeed haunted, however. The ghostly shadow I saw walking in my best friend's house after one of those worst Ouija board scares turned out to be from a damaged lampshade that was spinning slowly. I've debunked every sighting, event, and encounter except for one. I'm over 50 years old now, and I still can't explain how this happened. Paranormal event, Virginia City, Nevada Boneyard, circa 1979. We enjoyed a family road vacation almost every year when I was a kid. For example, we drove from California to New York State when I was 2, so I could meet my East Coast grandparents. During the summer of 78 or 79, I was about 10. My mom and dad drove us kids from California to Yellowstone, then up to Mount Rushmore, down to Mesa Verde. And our dad never stopped moving. 5 minutes to get out of the car, look at the Grand Canyon, then it was back on the road to reach the next postcard destination. This was his idea of a great time. On the way back home from Mesa Verde, we stopped in Virginia City, Nevada. That's where I once believed I experienced a paranormal encounter. We had a great time touring the town and shops of Virginia City. It was just like an old West town I'd seen in all of my favorite cowboy movies. I was thrilled when a Western-style shootout happened on Main Street. The loser had squibs in his torso that exploded fake blood and he fell near my feet. I was surprised and proud to have a drop of fake blood on my shirt. I wouldn't let my mom wash that shirt for ages. It was a 10-year-old boy's idea of the most awesome day ever. At one point, my dad took me and my younger sister to the cemetery. I think we were killing time, while my mom took my younger brother to the restroom. We stayed very close to my dad. My sister held his hand. I was trying to be brave, so I didn't. Cemeteries were spooky to us kids then. Anyway, I was obsessed with the birth years and death years, and fairly good at doing basic math in my head. So I was very focused at each plot, crunching the numbers on every date listed to determine age of death, proudly calling out my answers. Our very road-weary dad would grunt his approval in response and walk to the next plot. My enthusiasm dimmed when I realized just how many women died in childbirth. Their babies had the same death dates as their mothers. Soon, I was silenced by the overwhelming population of kids and babies in the place. The event I will never forget happened at one large family plot. I was looking at the headstones of the kids when I suddenly fell forward onto the grave without warning or intent. My dad yelled at me to stay off the graves. He'd already warned us it was taboo. I still can't explain how or why I fell. My sister, who was 7 or 8, still remembers because it scared her. She said I simply fell forward as if I fell asleep, except she could see I was still awake. I don't recall tripping, losing balance, locking knees, fainting, feeling a force or a push or pull. I didn't lose time. I simply fell, completely conscious, onto the grave of the dead kids. I caught my fall with both hands and was frozen in fear for a moment, staring at the ground and bottom of the headstone. Picture me mid-push-up, with my knees on the ground, frozen, shaking, scared to look up at the headstone. I don't remember standing up. It really scared the hell out of me. And that's it. I still don't know what happened. I haven't debunked my sister's belief that it was indeed something paranormal. She fully believes in ghosts and thinks I was pulled towards the grave. I used to believe the same. While I no longer believe in the paranormal, I don't have an explanation for what happened to me in the Virginia City boneyard back in 1979. Epilogue. I hope you enjoyed my retelling. This is the true biographical version of a story that has been embellished over the decades. I used to tell the embellished fictional version as a ghost story around campfires for kids and scouts. The tale has always been told in the oral tradition. This is the first time I put any version of this story to paper. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.